ANM, American Northwest Magazine. Please subscribe. Welcome to American Northwest Aviation. I'm Danny. The purpose of this video is to get you started working on your private pilot license for free. You can do everything that you need to do to pass the written exam right here online. All the resources are available for free. After you have passed your private pilot written exam, you can start taking flight lessons. I recommend you just go for a discovery flight, they call them, at your local flight school, and it'll cost $100 to $200, somewhere in there. And then get back to the books and study hard and get your flight simulator set up. And that would consist of using a big screen TV and a gaming computer running Microsoft Flight Sim 2020. And there's many airplanes to choose from there. And you can do so much there practicing. But you would need an instructor to help you out there. And I'm available. In fact, I can give you a free half an hour on WhatsApp, or we could use MicrosoftMeetings.com to get you started. But the whole point of this is to facilitate you in doing as much as possible toward getting your private pilot license to save more than half of the cost of what it would cost to get your license or certificate, private pilot certificate. So where we're going to start today is to look at 3 places to begin studying. The first one would be the regulations, just so you can see what is required to get your private pilot license and what privileges you have after you get your private pilot license. The second thing we'll look at is downloading some of the free books and manuals from FAA.gov, and also getting access to the Aeronautical Information Manual on FAA.gov. And with these, and I forgot to mention also a link to the electronic code of federal regulations to find the regulations. Well, actually, we mentioned that first. That's where we're going to find the requirements for the private pilot license. So, again, we're going to facilitate you to get your private pilot license at probably half the cost or less than what it would cost if you just went to a flight school. So, step one. Step one. Let's go to American Northwest Aviation, and you can do a Google search or click in the description to go to our website. This is the mobile view. So we'll zoom in here. American Northwest Aviation. Click on More in the menu and click on Online Aviation Resources. Again, this is the mobile view, so that's why I have to zoom in. So yes, you can do this on your phone. This is a Google spreadsheet, Google Drive, that I can update, and you can use the same link. But I can update these links for you as time goes on. Actually, click the highlighted site below the actual entry on the sheet there. Now you can click on here and you can get the whole book. If you click on that, it'll take you to Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge. You may have an issue with your security software, especially if you're on Edge, and it will block you from going here, but this is the main textbook for studying for your written test. Put out by the FAA. And you can download it and it's a PDF. Let's go to the table of contents. We pass it. Well, it's not fully downloaded here yet, but let's go back to FAA here. Let's just click on, so here's the entire book, but you can also download each PDF separately by chapter. If you run into this block, just copy the website, open up a new page, and paste it in the address bar, enter, and there you go. Or just use Google Chrome. So in this textbook, there's an introduction. Talks about aeronautical decision making in Chapter 2, construction of aircraft. Chapter 3, principles of flight. This is where you'll learn some aerodynamics, or an intro to aerodynamics. And then Chapter 5 is aerodynamics. Chapter 6, flight controls. Chapter 7, aircraft systems. Chapter 8, flight instruments. Chapter 9, flight manuals and other documents. Chapter 10, weight and balance. Chapter 11, aircraft performance. Weather theory in Chapter 12. Aviation weather services in Chapter 13, which has changed significantly over the decades. Chapter 14, airport operations. 15, aerospace. 16, navigation. 17, aeromedical factors. And then a glossary. Appendix C, airport signs and markings. Appendix B, acronyms, abbreviations, and NOTAM contractions. NOTAM is a report that you'll learn about under the weather section. Notice to airmen. And again, there are section, or not again, but all of these are also expanded upon in the Aeronautical Information Manual, or the AIM, that we'll show the link to later. So that is your textbook. Okay, so this time, now we're going to just do a search for ECFR. ECFR regulations. And it stands for the Electronic Code of Federal Regulations. And now we have the titles here. This is the federal the federal regulations for everything, including banking, agriculture, highways, judicial system, alcohol, money and finance, national defense, education, Everything that is a federal regulation should be in here. We're going to be dealing with Title 14, Aeronautics and Space, and Title 49, which is Transportation, particularly the hazmat section. So let's go ahead and click on Title 14. We're going to click on 1 through 199, which is Federal Aviation Administration, Department of Transportation. 1 through 199, and here it's expanded. And we're going to click on 60 through 68, which is Airmen. Certification, which is how a pilot becomes a pilot and all the different ratings. So this is for pilots, flight instructors, and ground instructors. You could also do a Google search, Part 61, private pilot requirements, and come up with a direct link here. So we're looking specifically for the private pilot. $61.5 certificates and ratings issued under this part. There's the private pilot. Now it's split up between certificates and then ratings. So certificate would be the private pilot versus the commercial or the airline transport pilot. And category would be airplane, rotorcraft, glider, or powerlift. Rotorcraft is a helicopter basically. So we're talking about airplane here. Of course, they're talking specifically about the flight instructor certificate, but it works the same with the private pilot certificate. So private pilot category would be airplane that we'd be working on, and class would be single engine initially, and then after the private pilot you would get a And by the way, private pilot means you can fly an airplane with passengers. If it's airplane multi-engine, airplane single-engine land, ASEL, that would be your class. Anyway, so the instrument rating would be later after you got your private pilot certificate. So you do need some guidance as to what to study, and so I am available for consultations over the phone or over WhatsApp or Microsoft Meetings, and we can also help you get set up with your flight simulator that way. If you're in Bellingham, Washington, or north of Seattle, as well as in Seattle, we can actually meet up and you can fly my flight simulator before you get yours set up. So now we're going to take a look at the Airman's Information Manual. You can do a search and just say FAA AIM and come up with this. But we'll have links in the description as well as on the website for you to do these, to get these links and download these. The AIM is more information. So, the textbook is for knowledge, generally speaking, and the Airman's Information Manual is basically an expansion of that knowledge. It's hard to describe, really, but you need to go to both places to get all of the information, your textbook and the AIM, as well as the Electronic Code of Federal Regulations. They overlap in many different ways, but so the way this is set up for the AIM is you can download each chapter. I don't think we're actually, we are on FAA.gov. Let's go back to, we are on FAA.gov. Okay, here's the Aeronautical Information Publication, AIP. No, this is what we want right here. Aeronautical Information Manual, AIM, Basic with Change 1. And that does bring us to the page I was on. So air navigation is split between navigation aids and performance-based navigation and area navigation. This has to do with flight management computers, GPS, and other aspects of navigation, whereas navigational aids here are talking about ground-based navigation instruments. I thought you could download these, but that doesn't look like the way it's set up anymore. Let me know if you're able to download them when you get there. But so there's air navigation, aeronautical lighting, airport visual aids, airspace, and in the FARs, the Federal Code of Regulations and Aviation Regulations, airspace will have a section that gives you the rules of that airspace. Like I say, they overlap. So if we click in airspace here, we're going to look at controlled airspace, for example. Here's a good graphic that shows you the dimensions and the information about them, not necessarily the rules. Well, again, if you're in an ultralight vehicle, which you don't need a license for, no person may operate an ultralight vehicle within Class A, B, C, or D airspace. So there are some rules in here, but the rules are going to be more specific under the Federal Code of Regulations. This is more general information. So you'll learn about Class B, Class C, Class D, and uncontrolled Class G airspace, as well as other airspace types and what you can do in them. So we're not going to go through every section here of the AIM, but you can see there's a lot of information for you to know before you can get your license, before you can take the written test and get your license, or take the practical test. So again, you take your written test. It might cost you at a flight school to take it for $200 or something like that. I don't know, but please let us know in the comments or email us for what your school charges to take the test. There's also a book you can buy that has sample questions, which are probably the entire book of all of the questions that they could possibly ask you to help you hone in your studying. Reading aeronautical charts. Unmanned aircraft systems, UAS. That's a different rating, 107. I do have that as well. By the way, I am a airline transport pilot. Flew for the airlines and for private jet operations and corporate jet operations, as well as many other types of operations, as well as been a airline pilot instructor in the flight simulators, and a director of operations of air carrier certificates, which means the director of operations for a private airline type operation. So let's look at air traffic procedures. Arrival procedures. A star is not something you'll deal with on your private pilot license. That's something you'll deal with in your instrument rating. So we're going to skip through this. Local flow traffic management program. That's not quite what we're looking for. They've got some nice diagrams, so hopefully we can see. Here we go. All right, again, this is not for the private pilot, just showing you what's in here. This is when you get your instrument rating, you'll learn how to read an approach chart like this. You're in the clouds and you want to land. You do a instrument approach. This is part of that structure. This is all instrument procedures. Well, we're going to have to skip that right now. I have to find out exactly where that is. Well, you know what? Let's do this. Traffic pattern. So airport operations might be what we were. There we go. So this is under air traffic control. So whether you have an airport with a control tower or not, this is the legs. These are the legs that you will be using to take off and to land at an airport. This is pretty blurry. I'm pretty disappointed in this. It's not your TV or phone, but that was a terrible diagram. Here we go. There's a much clearer one. So basically when you take off, you're on the upwind leg, and then when you turn left or right 90 degrees, that's the crosswind leg, and then this is the downwind leg, and then this is base leg when you're about to land, and then you turn left and you're on final. So as you can tell, you are upwind, so you're taking off into the wind. The wind is blowing this way and you are going this way. So again, upwind, crosswind, downwind, base leg. So again, this is an example of the diagrams that are going to be very useful. This is the headwind component chart, so you can calculate how much of a crosswind you're going to have. That will become more clear as you go on with your studying. If you don't have an operating control tower, in other words, it's an uncontrolled airport, you just talk on the radio and coordinate with the other traffic. Let them know where you are, and if someone's in front of you, you got to delay, and keep the space. So you're coordinating with the other traffic. And there are some tools, even though there's no control tower, such as the segmented circle, which shows you which way the wind is blowing, and also will show you how to enter the traffic pattern, left or right traffic. By the way, left traffic means you're making left turns, right traffic means you're making right turns. For example, if you're going to do a right crosswind departure, that means you take off and you turn right. If you're doing left crosswind departure, again, you're turning left 90 degrees during your takeoff's departure. So you'll learn about control towers, so controlled airports versus uncontrolled airports, and what airspace is associated with it, what restrictions you have for controlled versus uncontrolled airspace, uncontrolled airports. And by the way, before you start all of this, you'll want to see an AME, an Aviation Medical Examiner. I believe that's what it stands for, to get at least a third-class medical certificate, which will act as your kind of like your license. Once you're approved to solo, it'll act as your license before you get your license. Of course, you will only be able to fly alone when endorsed for solo flights. That endorsement will be on your medical certificate. But it's good to know if you're going to pass your medical certificate before you start studying hard. And again, just contact me through the links in the description, and we can help you out with that. So that is the Airman's Information Manual. It might not be called Airman. I think it might be Air Crew. See, it just says AIM here. So you've got your regulations under Title 14 of the Electronic Code of Federal Regulations. You've got your textbook. The Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge, and the Airman's Information Manual. Okay, we got that. Yeah, Airman's Information Manual and the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge and the ECFRs, Title 14. That's enough to get you started. Again, a free 30-minute session for anyone who wants to contact me, and we can have a video or just a regular phone call. Get you started. And again, we can also help you set up your flight simulator. Thank you. Please subscribe to American Northwest Magazine. Oh, and by the way, we do have a separate channel, which is in the description, called American Northwest Aviation. And this video will be there as well. ANM, American Northwest Magazine. Please subscribe. Thank you for watching.